Hey, how's it going? I'm Seth, and this is my Atraxa Poison deck overview. My commander here, Atraxa, one of the most, if not the most, popular commander in the format. She's Witch, which is all the colors except for red, and she's got Flying, Vigilance, Death Touch, and Lifelink, which are great keywords, and she's a 4/4. None of that matters except for this second line of text right here. At the beginning of my end step, proliferate. That is one of the best lines and the best text in all of the cards that exist in Magic the Gathering, which is why she is one of, if not the most popular commander in the format, and just a crazy card to have. So she's my commander for this deck. I get to play around with all the colors but red, and I ended up making a poison deck. So all my friends hate it. My brothers hate it. I love it. It's great. Let's get into it. So starting off with ramp, we've got some different pieces of ramp. So we've got to start off Emerald and Pearl Medallion. This is just going to make green and white spells cost a little bit less, which means you can get that stuff out earlier. If you got some big drops, then it's going to make them a lot cheaper. It's pretty nice. They also do work on commander attacks. So if I've got both of these bad boys out when Atraxa is not, let's say she just died for the first time and went back to command zone, she's going to only cost 4 because since she is a green and a white spell, then technically she's going to cost 1 less off of each of these. It works out really well. Next up, we got Mirror Convert. So this guy is a 2-drop, and he's got Toxic 1, and he's 2/1, but you can also tap and pay 2 life to add 1 mana of any color. Early game, this is a game changer. He's really going to come in handy, whether you're trying to get Toxic onto your opponents or you just need the mana. He works out really well. I really do enjoy him. Then we've got Growing Rites of Itlimoc. This is sort of a mid to late game thing. Not quite late game, but it can get taken care of pretty early. This is just going to make sure that you get some creatures out, hopefully, and then once you do have enough creatures, it will give you a ton of mana. Just, add a green mana for each creature you control. Works out really well. Thirsting Roots, this lets you go and get a basic land, or you can also proliferate, whether it's early game and you need the mana, or late game and you just want to put some more Toxic on your opponents. This is really good. Same thing with Glistening Sphere. Enters, and it's going to come in tapped, but when it comes in, you're going to proliferate, and then once one or more opponents have 3 or more poison counters, you can actually tap it to add 3 mana, which is really great for a 3-drop. Works out really well, and you're going to get your opponents 3 poison counters pretty early on, ideally with this deck. But yeah, that's it for ramp. Next up, we'll move to just giving your opponents poison. Now, other than low-drop creatures that have Toxic, this is what you're going to use to get all of your opponents and give them the poison. So we got Prologue to Phryresis, and this lets you draw a card, and each opponent gets a poison counter. Infectious Inquiry, you draw 2, lose 2 life, and each opponent gets a poison counter. And then Caress of Phyrexia, maybe there was one opponent that built up pretty early on, you can't really get through their defenses, and this is what you hit them with. They get to draw 3 cards, they lose 3 life, but they also get 3 poison counters. So, you can be like, oh, well, you wanted to draw 3 cards? Here's some poison as well. Next up, we've got some important protection pieces. So, first off, we've got Norn's Decree. Whenever one or more creatures an opponent controls deal damage to you, that opponent gets a poison counter. It incentivizes your opponents not to hit you, because if they do, they'll get more poison, and it'll just speed your deck along. They'll be held back. And then also, whenever a player attacks, if one or more players being attacked are poisoned, the attacking player draws a card. So whether, it's you attacking your opponents or your opponents attacking each other, whoever's attacking somebody, as long as they have a poison counter, you're going to get to draw, which is nice. You need that draw for this deck. Then we've got Ghostly Prison as well as Propaganda. They do the same thing, just making sure that your opponents cannot attack you unless they pay more mana for each creature attacking you. Now, with just one of these out, then they have to pay 2 mana for each creature attacking. But if you've got both of these guys out, then it's 4 mana per attacking creature. Unless it's super late game or nobody's just, casting spells, then these come in real handy. And then finally, we've got Venerated Rot Priest. Along with being a 1-drop with Toxic 1, so just getting it out early game so you can get all of your opponents with the poison. Its ability, whenever a creature you control becomes a target of spell, target opponent gets a poison counter. Whether it's a target of your spell or your opponent's spell, it doesn't matter. If you're targeting one of your creatures with a spell. As long as this guy is out, you can just give somebody a poison counter. It works out really well. Next up, we've got some recursion. Now, this is the only... There are more recursion cards in this, but this is one of the best cards in the deck for recursion. Phyrexian Reclamation. It's a 1-drop enchantment that for 2 mana and 2 life, you can just bring a creature from graveyard back to hand. It's really, really good to have. You know, you're probably going to get targeted a bunch. All of your stuff's going to die over and over again. So this is really great to have, especially if you have a card like Cankerbloom, where... let's see, yeah, Cankerbloom right here. I found out that if I have, you know, if you have a decent enough mana, you have Phyrexian Reclamation out and Cankerbloom, you can just play this over and over again, sacrifice it, continue to bring it out, and you sacrifice it, continue to proliferate, or maybe destroy an enchantment or an artifact that somebody else has, and it's a nice combo to have. Works out really well, but Phyrexian Reclamation, really good recur piece. Then we've got some Anthem. Just got a couple of enchantments for Anthem. So Tangled Skyline, it's going to enter, and you're going to gain 5 life and incubate 5. And then Phyrexians you control have reach. It's really important for, you know, Phyrexians that don't have flying, or I don't think I have any Phyrexians that have reach now that I'm thinking about it. But yeah, this just, you know, helping you with the flyers that other players might have, it works out really well. And then Sculpted Perfection, you're going to incubate again, and then Phyrexians you control get +1/+1. Just a little bit of a buff. Works out. For Tutor, we have Threats Undetected. This is going to let you search your library for 4 cards of differing powers, and then you reveal them. You then choose an opponent, and they separate those cards into 2 piles, where they choose 2 of the cards to go back into your library, and the other 2 go into hand. If you have cards like Skithiryx or Vishgraz, Glissa, and Ixel, Crick, Son of Yawgmoth, like cards I have in here, then it works out really well. They can kind of, you know, all good cards that will work together to further along your goal of just killing everybody by poison slowly, but, you know, it'll end up working out faster. They have to then choose whether or not they want to, you know, have maybe your proliferate, you proliferate an additional time every time you do, or you draw a card when you proliferate. It makes them have to, you know, think about what they will rather take in return. But in any event, it helps you out because you just get 2 creatures that are good for your deck. Next up, we've got some important pieces of the deck, and I've got a good number of these. So Tekuthal Inquiry Dominus, he's going to make sure that when you proliferate, you instead proliferate twice. And since you're proliferating on your end step each time, you're gonna make a lot of poison counters. It's also kind of a +1/+1 counter deck-ish. There's some other cards in here that I don't think I have out, but still give you some, you know, buffing your creatures up. So that's pretty good too. And then he's also got some great protection. You can remove 3 counters from creatures and planeswalkers you control, and then he'll get an indestructible counter. So if somebody's targeting Tekuthal, you just make sure you can protect him because he's a very important piece. And then Innkeeper's Talent. This is pretty good. This gives you +1/+1 counters, and then permanents you control with counters have Ward 1, so that helps as well. And then if you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. So whenever you proliferate off of Atraxa or anybody else, if Innkeeper's Talent is all the way to level 3, then whenever you proliferate, they'll get 2 poison counters, and you can put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature you control. Very, very good to have in a deck like this. And if you have Tekuthal and Innkeeper's Talent out at the same time, it's a matter of 2 or 3 turns before you just win. Azuri Stalker of Spheres, this is just going to make it so that every time you proliferate, you're drawing cards. That is a big part of this deck, is that you usually are not drawing a ton of cards. That's the biggest issue that this deck has. But with her out, you're usually fine for the most part. Glissa, Herald of Predation. She's going to make sure that you're making incubators for blockers, because a lot of the times you'll have these little guys with Toxic, and you'll be left up with with no blockers, or with guys who can't block, like Phyrexian Mites. They straight up just cannot block. And then she also has, at the beginning of combat, you know, you can make incubators, you can transform all of the incubators you control, and you can also give all of your Phyrexians First Strike and Death Touch till end of turn. Great finishing piece, just great to have. XL Scion of Atraxa, along with being kind of low mana, early mid game. She's also going to make it so you're going to steal your opponent's cards as long as they have 3 or more poison counters. You're just going to exile the top card of your deck, and then you can catch those cards. Even whether or not those cards are good for you, it's just good to, get them out of your opponent's hands if they are good cards so that they can't use them. Crick, Son of Yawgmoth, a great card to have. It's going to make your cards cheaper, and then his lifelink, along with Atraxa's lifelink, is going to help a ton because you're going to get targeted a lot, so you need the lifelink. And then finally, for important pieces, we've got Norn's Choirmaster. Whenever your commander enters or attacks, you proliferate, which is amazing because usually you're going to be swinging with Atraxa, get that life gain, and since she has Vigilance, keeping her up as a blocker as well is really, really good to have. It's also going to incentivize, like cards like Norn's Choirmaster and Ixel and Glissa are going to incentivize and take the heat off of Atraxa and try to get your opponents to, take these guys out before you get rid of Atraxa, which, isn't the coolest when, your Norn's Choirmaster gets Swords of Plowshares, but at the same time, as long as Atraxa's out, your deck is working. Ideally, as long as Atraxa's out and your opponents have poison counters, that is. Anyways, finally, we've got some finishers. Phyrexian Swarmlord. He's got Infect, and technically this is an older printing. The newer printings, I think this one came in a precon. I think it came in the XL precon, actually. And they changed his creature typing to Phyrexian Horror instead of Insect Horror, I believe. But technically this card doesn't count as a Phyrexian, I think. If not, and I'm wrong about that, let me know in the comments. But at the beginning of your upkeep, you put 1/1 green insect creature tokens with Infect onto the battlefield for each poison counter among your opponents. So, if each of your opponents have 4 poison counters and you have 3 opponents, you make 12 little guys with Infect. That's pretty good. And this doesn't specify that they cannot block, so having blockers that will put 1/1, -1/-1 counters on your opponents, and, you can make those bigger with Atraxa, that's going to really, really take the heat off your back. Then we've got Skithiryx, 5-drop 4/4 with Flying and Infect, and you can give him haste until end of turn, and you can regenerate him. He's just really good to have. Great for blocking, but really, really good for just pumping your opponents with that poison. And finally, we've got Vishgraz. Now, he gets bigger for the poison counters that your opponents have, and when he enters, he will create 3 Phyrexian Mites to put more poison on your opponents. But yeah, these are the finishers, and all in all, I've had this deck for a little less than a year. I think I made it last year on my Christmas break, and I'm now currently on my winter break. So, yeah, it's been about a year that I've had this deck. I completely revised it, completely rebuilt it, got a ton of cards for it just a couple months ago. So, completely all new, all completed Atraxa. But, yeah, hope you like it. That's about it, and have a good one.